Welcome to the Gamified life. How insecurity works. Insecurity works like a simple game, a clear set of controls that govern many people's daily lives from a control center deep within our minds. It makes us move to the whims of its mercy. Some players have learned to conquer it and use it to empower their well-being. Some have tried to block off the insecurity's influences, but most are unaware of its presence and are controlled like helpless puppets. By navigating through the depths of our minds, along with plenty of introspection and research, I learned that Mr. Insecurity from deep within has one main function: to warn the player from any danger and help them live a better life. It sounds like a wonderful thing, and it really is, but there's one big problem. Mr. Insecurity's job can be a double-edged sword, because he is only one small part of the picture. Unable to coordinate with his fellow peers, all he can do is send signals, hoping the system is robust enough to generate a good outcome. He does this by maintaining the security bucket, a bucket that represents the amount of security you, as a player, currently have, with a full bucket being fully secured and an empty one insecure. Going over the bucket's components, first we have inputs. Whenever something good happens or there are positive outcomes, your bucket receives security, filling up the bucket. It could come internally through working out to feel fit, or journaling to understand yourself. Or it could come from external means through compliments or winning competitions. Next we have thresholds, which represents where a loss of security will start affecting the player, where behavior begins to shift into dangerous mental states. Perhaps at 50%, you will enter a lower mental state, slightly affecting your mood and decisions, and at 25% capacity, a bad mental state which negatively impacts temperament, causing you to make poor decisions, having a loss of awareness, and confusing right from wrong. And at 5% capacity, an extreme mental state, which significantly impacts capabilities. Panic and fear occur, and desperate measures may be deployed. Lastly, we have the trigger faucet, an outlet for the security we've accumulated in our bucket that responds to negative triggers. Triggers come in all shapes and sizes, from things like weight, failure, and being broke. Over our lifetime, Mr. Insecurity has been watching from his office deep within, taking note of triggers encountered. These triggers are created through the process of encountering any given situation, and ending with a bad outcome. This results in a loss of security, and the situation is turned into a trigger to be recorded on the trigger list. In the future, every time a situation is encountered and is on the trigger list, there will be an initial loss of security. And if a threshold is breached, there will be a decreased chance of having a good outcome. The amount of security lost due to a trigger depends on the trigger's severity level. This is based on two things: the number of times a bad outcome has occurred, and also how negative the consequences are for each outcome. Running into the same trigger, unprepared, over and over, will continuously increase the trigger's severity level, which would look something like this. With each bad outcome, the trigger will increase in level, leading to higher rates of security loss and lower rates of success. The trigger loop becomes negatively self-enforcing, while failing an extremely important quest may instantly throw you into extreme insecurity levels, possibly inducing trauma. Because every player's trigger list is different, each player will react to specific triggers differently, some being more sensitive to certain topics. The reaction towards a trigger is also dependent on how much security is currently in the bucket to cushion it, or in other words, room before a threshold is breached. Maybe they were already having a terrible day and have little room left to tolerate what is usually small. Other than initiating triggers, Mr. Insecurity is also in charge of keeping the security bucket above safe levels, so he is constantly looking out for thresholds. And as soon as one dips below a certain level, he fires off signals to the Security Control Command Center to engage in security replenishment actions. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Which Coping Mechanism is Your Coping Mechanism quiz. When you encounter a difficult event, do you A. attempt to modify or directly confront the stressful event, or B. attempt to manage emotional reactions to stress? If you selected A as your answer, you are generally more problem-focused, someone who responds in a more action-oriented manner, using problem-solving or direct actions. If you selected B as your answer, you are generally more emotion-focused, someone who responds with social withdrawal, distraction, or emotional venting from both internal and externalizing reactions. Now, we are all a mix of both emotion and problem-focused coping. Because to use problem-focused coping mechanisms, there are a number of hurdles to overcome. We need to first check, can I fix it? Do I want to fix it? And do I have the time to fix it now? When there are things that are too far out of our control or require a long time to fix, we can only rely on emotion-focused coping before the situation can be resolved. And that's all, folks. Back to the signal. Once the signal reaches our security command center, we find Mrs. Coping, another important character dwelling deep within the control center. She is in charge of our previously discussed coping mechanisms, which are engaged when security falls below a certain threshold. To understand how these coping mechanisms came about, we need to once again go all the way back and take a look at our past, where Mrs. Coping took note of all of our traumas and how they were dealt with. These traumas include things like losing something important to you, being lonely or rejected, being incompetent, or doing something wrong. Being the beginner players of life that we were, Mrs. Coping has not fully developed yet, so we needed guidance on how to deal with trouble. For example, when our childhood toy tower collapses, the best outcome would be to have a quick, sensitive, and empathetic reaction from our guardian to help us feel safe, secure, and further explore. This allows us to obtain a generally more secure coping style, where we know our needs would be met and give us courage to face the challenges ahead. This is usually met with the problem-focused approach in coping. In case 2, we may receive nothing, a very disengaged and distant reaction, leaving us to believe that our needs won't be met in dire times, to fend for ourselves, leading us to be avoidant, insecure. Obtaining the avoidant coping style, we subconsciously believe our needs won't be met, making us distant, non-exploratory, and constantly avoiding situations and confrontations altogether. This goes hand in hand with a more emotion-focused approach in coping. In case 3, we may receive an inconsistent reaction, sometimes sensitive, sometimes distant, leaving us to believe that our needs will not be met reliably, leaving us feeling anxious, insecure. Obtaining the anxious coping style, we subconsciously believe our needs will not be met reliably, making us nervous and anxious, causing unhealthy emotional responses. This one also falls into a more emotion-focused approach in coping, but on the opposite side of the spectrum. Keep in mind that for each case, Miss Coping is only trying to figure out how to protect ourselves from the environment we're given, and not necessarily what the best option is. Especially when we did not know how to decide what the best option was during our developmental stage. So this is why as we progress through childhood, some of us pass through relatively safe and secure, achieving a much higher level of security, while some of us aren't as lucky, being dealt a bad hand with deeply rooted insecurities that will take a long time and effort to unravel and unpackage. This is also why, as adults, we end up with very different coping mechanisms. Some of us calmly and confidently figure things out, while some of us tend to create distance, subconsciously avoiding things, thinking needs won't be met anyways. And others consistently getting angry or anxious, with things constantly battering the mind. So now that we've gone over how everything works, how do we level up security? I take it in a 3-step process. Understand the trigger, generate confidence, and remove the trigger. Step 1. Understanding the trigger. So remember Mr. Insecurity's list of triggers? It's a pretty long list that's been accumulating throughout your lifetime, and although many triggers come and go as you grow, there are many things that linger behind, never to be fully unraveled and viewed in an objective way. But tackling this long list of triggers one by one is too inefficient. Instead, try approaching it through categorization. Place the triggers into separate areas of life, which I discussed in a previous video, life goals. These triggers reflect how secure or insecure you are in each area, which is why our overall security is based on the accumulation of all these little buckets. And once again, if everyone's list of triggers is different, so will the orientation of buckets be different. Step 2. Generate confidence. Because triggers follow the self-reinforcing loop, triggers leading to lower security, increasing chance of failure, negative outcomes which then increase trigger levels again, we need a way of hijacking the system to work in our favor, by finding out how to get the positive resolution when facing difficult triggers. Let's start by defining what feeling secure means. Feeling secure means to feel safe, protected, comfortable with how things are, free from fear and doubt. Or in what I'd like to say, Confidence. Simply put, confidence in knowing that things will be okay because you have the skills, resources, and knowledge of overcoming the insecurity, also known as self-efficacy. Confidence is the key to dealing with triggers because they directly contribute to the bucket's ability to maintain security, preventing the trigger faucet from releasing. Let's take a closer look. A bucket's ability to contain its security can be separated into different classes based on confidence level, with the C class being an old wooden bucket that's always leaky, unable to contain its security, with its requirements in the low end. Low level skills, no items or equipment, and no knowledge, resulting in a very low level of confidence. To the S class, golden bucket with non-existent loss of security. It requires proficient level of skills, top-of-the-line equipment, and knowledge at your fingertips, leaving it to have a very high level of confidence. So going back to the trigger loop, with the introduction of confidence, we can skip the negative reinforcing loop completely, keeping our bucket secured. Going down the regular route, this leads us to the final step, removing triggers. Because a high confidence level reduces the effects of triggers, we end up following the regular route. And within the regular route, when your confidence is backed up by the proper abilities, resources, and knowledge, we can increase the success rate of any situation. When we succeed once, anything related on the trigger list will severely level down, confidence will level up, and all the related abilities, resources, and knowledge will also improve, which means in the future the success rate will increase as well. And just like the negative reinforcing loop, we can also create a positive reinforcing loop. With each good outcome, triggers go down, levels increase, success rate goes up, eventually completely eradicating our triggers with success after success. So with confidence as the baseline, we can now go over some examples of buckets and create battle plans towards removing triggers. Using health and physical insecurities as an example, our battle plan revolves around improving and building healthy lifestyle habits. Skills can include healthy eating, sleeping, and exercising habits and routines. Your items and resources can include having a good exercise equipment, a good bed and cooking space, maybe a fitness coach and sleeping apps, and a personalized meal kit. Knowledge can include personal health knowledge, good tracking data, and knowledge of fitness and diet. As for financial insecurity, your battle plan should revolve around understanding where your money flows and do some budgeting and investing. Skills can include basic accounting and budgeting. Items and resources can include advisors, accountants, investments, and apps to keep track of spending. And lastly, knowledge of good money management principles, job and career progressions, income and expenses. And with these battle plans, we can develop positive reinforcing loops for every single area of life, except for relationship insecurities, which will be coming out soon in part 2. And don't forget, the controller is in your hands. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell, or else poor Jeff will always be insecure, struggling to find peace with his videos.